Hello and welcome back to CryptoCast. I'm your host, James Burney, and today we're exploring one of the biggest challenges in Web3, which is growth. If you've spent any time in the Web3 space, you'll know that building great technology is only half the battle. The real challenge is finding your audience, sharpening your message, and turning interest into revenue. And yet, so many promising projects burn through their budgets before they ever figure that out. Today's guest has made her mission to change that. With over 15 years of experience scaling startups, she's seen the same patterns play out time and time again when she's brought in to fix the commercial mess after damage is done. And now she's decided to get ahead of the problem entirely. Tanya is the CEO and founder of the Web3 Growth Engine, a platform built to give Web3 founders and the commercial clarity they need before customer mistakes are made. Through a diagnostic-led framework, founders get a clear commercial operating system, defining the ideal customer, sharpening their narrative, and walking away with a practical 90-day go-to-market plan they can execute immediately. Hello, Tanya. Great to have you on the show. Delighted to introduce Tanya Dias to CryptoCast.
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
So, Tanya, before we go into kind of what you're building at the moment, can you go background and kind of your journey to date and what brought you into Web3?
Yeah, so I was a commercial growth orientated person. So I've been operating in the space a long time. I started off in Web2 in investment banking, actually. And I was in commercial growth there. I saw the same patterns in Web2 that I saw in Web2 startups and then later Web3 startups. And it created the journey that went into producing and starting this commercial journey of Web3 Growth Engine. And some of these patterns are things like not knowing who your real customer is, not knowing what the product market fit is, and not being able to create a model where you get repeat revenue. It sounds basic, but it's surprising. Like in Web2, you get 75% of startups actually failing. And in Web3, it's a lot more extreme because founders move faster. They have sometimes more funding and they've still not learned the lessons. they fail faster as well. So there's something good in that, in the sense that you want to fail fast and then learn faster. But it's the learning part that I'm kind of dealing with, really, with founders. And I've worked with hundreds of startups, so I do see the same patterns over and over again.
So it's interesting because I think we deal quite a lot with first-time founders, and a lot of the time they have a product. Do you think they should start with the product, or do you think they should sort of start with the marketing and kind of look for product fit before they develop the product? How do you sort of prioritize sort of day one?
Well, they should build a product where there is a gap in the market, so they're actually solving a problem that's currently not being solved for customers. So there's no point creating product where there's no market for it at all. That's just an obvious take. But if they are creating products that have that fit because they know that this is a real pain point for a particular customer, it might be maybe a commercial institutional customer, or it might be a retail customer, that's a good starting point for creating a product. And luckily, most Web3 founders are doing it that way around. They are finding a problem, maybe like in DeFi, there's a classic issue. A lot of TradFi is not really working for the retail side of the industry. Many people are unbanked or underbanked because products are not there for them. So a lot of crypto DeFi companies are creating products that fit that gap. So they've got a natural market for their product. So that's always a good starting point. But how they then choose to market is the next stage.
And because again, it's always kind of unclear what to do with the marketing side. Before we kind of go into how do you know if your marketing strategy is kind of not working? I mean, you get people who sort of sit and they don't really know whether it's going to work. What sort of symptoms do you get when you walk in and you know that things aren't going well?
Yeah, so usually when I am called in by a founder, they have burned through maybe $250,000 on marketing and sales because they had been doing a scattergun approach with their marketing. They're trying to, do the market and do a product launch for the entire market. They don't really know who their customer is. They haven't figured out the product market fit. And their first idea after doing the beta testing of the product is, right, let's go and market, let's hire a marketer. And there's usually an execution-based marketer. So the founder would say something like, I want 2,500 activations per week for my DeFi product, or go and find me 5 customers at the end of this week. That's really broad. And when an execution-focused marketer or an agency, a marketing agency, hears that, they first want to solve that problem because that will make the founder happy. But what actually happens is because the founder hasn't done the initial work of what the value proposition is, what the product market fit is, who the ideal customer is, they're not sending their marketers or their agencies in the right direction to get the right customers. So they will do a scattergun approach, and then a few months later, say 6 months later, they've burned through this 250,000 runway, and the ice age has set in. The founder is no longer speaking to their marketing team. The marketing team and the agency cannot get a meeting with the founder. And they just get told, oh, I've hired a CMO and they'll sort you out. And that's usually when I come in and I get a similar brief to what the initial marketing hire or the agency hire had, except I also get this extra caveat that, oh, we've already burned through $250,000 and now the marketing budget is a lot smaller and we've got no metrics to show, we don't have customers. The sales team are working independently because they're not getting leads through whatever marketing is doing. So I get a slightly different brief from what they get. And my first exercise is really working closely with the founder and the founding team to set up the foundations. So, I talked about the product market fit. What's problem is their product solving? What are they trying to achieve? Those basic strategic steps are missing. And it surprises me that I'm seeing this over and over. The founders, wherever they are, whatever echo chamber they are in, or whoever they're speaking or listening to, they're not learning this education piece, basically. They are, whoever they're listening to, they're just following the other startups and they're jumping off this commercial cliff. And there are plenty of startups and projects who have matured and then they've disappeared. I mean, CryptoKitty is a classic example, and there's DAppRadar. There are other projects, many of whom have had good tech, have had initial success, and then they've just disappeared. And it's usually not because of the tech or the community, it's because a lack of commercial model and repeating revenue. They've not really thought that through and not pivoted fast enough.
And because I think this is something we're just kind of under talked about at the moment. There's quite a lot of marketing agencies out there selling marketing, but in terms of how do you go about them, and it might also sort of talking about what you're doing in the space as well, in terms of how do you actually go about working out commercially answering these things, because it sounds easy when you say it, but if you sort of said to someone go and do it, I think it might be a lot harder to do in practice. So how would you go about sort of doing it before you speak to the marketing team?
Yeah, so this is the challenge that Web3 Growth Engine was created to do. It's to fix that education gap, and then help the founders structurally think through that whole process, which shouldn't take them long, and get them to a point where they can have a 90-day GTM plan. And then once they start to scale up, they can hire their first marketing BD hires or their agencies because they have sufficiently scaled enough and they've got a repeatable idea and engine of how their product works, who their real customers are, and where to find them, what channels they are in, how they speak in those channels. So it's a different proposition when they give an execution-focused marketer or an agency the brief of, this is my customer. They are age 25. They're in Brazil, and they are mainly engaging through Reddit, for example. Go and find me 20 customers who fit this exact profile. It's a different, more clear brief that a marketer or an agency can go and execute on, rather than, I want 2,500 activations per week. It doesn't matter who, that's a quite different brief, and that particular bit of the education is basically what I'm here to solve with founders. So I am speaking to them all the time. Like in Solana, I'm a GTM mentor, and I'm repeating the same thing. And soon it's starting to make traction. People are starting to listen. They're starting to understand that, because there are so many case studies of projects failing all the time, and they know they've got limited runway, whether it's grant funding, VC funding. They don't want to run through that and then have no milestones to show, especially if they've got investors. So it's a real pain problem, especially like when you're in a bear market. You need to really show that you got commercial viability.
Yeah, actually, because one of the things we hear quite a lot, and it's an issue we get on the legal side, someone turns up and goes, I just want to go global. And the assumption is more is always better, effectively. So when you go, which jurisdictions would you like? Well, I go, well, every jurisdiction in the world, because I can get more clients. And you sort of look at them slightly quizzically, because North Korea is probably not the most active jurisdiction when it comes to client base. But we try and knock out the worst sinners in the room and try and work out how to get it. What would you say to people who kind of come in and just say, look, why am I trying to limit myself? Why don't I just go after anything with a pulse and try and make it a client?
I would say that every successful product, it doesn't matter if it's Web3, Web2, they all started off in a niche. Like the internet, when it was first created, started off in the defense sector, academia, and then defense sector, and then spread out. With AI, it's following a similar kind of journey, and now it's moving more to the creative industries and growing wider and rippling out. And that's how successful products are. They always start off in a niche. It's easier to market and to sell when it's in a niche. And also the legal side is a lot easier, because you're dealing with only a few jurisdictions on one jurisdiction. So it's easier to get all the compliance checks done. And it's easier to market as well and commercialize. And then you can repeat your commercial model in different jurisdictions, maybe with slight tweaks, maybe for the US, for example, after moving from the UK. So it's just a repeatable revenue model that just makes sense and is what works. It might not be as exciting as saying I'm going to go global from day one, but it's going to be like, well, I'm still around after 10 years, and the one who went global from day one is gone. It's a different story. So you have to think long term, and I think with crypto, we're very good at thinking short term.
Just on, because one of the things we've seen quite a lot of, people chase after grants quite often. You mentioned grants previously.
Yeah.
Grants tend to come with conditions a lot of the time.
Yeah.
If you were starting off, how would you react to kind of the grant-based systems out there? Do you think there's something that people should aim towards and try and make, because making a business or competing for a grant may be different to, shall we say, going for a particular marketing strategy, because the grants want to push you there sometimes in certain ways. How would you go about kind of dealing with grants if you're running a startup?
Yes, so some of the main blockchains like Ethereum, Solana, their grants are very much operational focused. So founders, startups, they tend to focus their grant money on product development and then setting up their operations. And then when the grants have run out, they ask again for another grant. And then that's the point where they think about doing the beta testing and then launching their product. But they haven't saved enough of the grant money for the commercial side. And then they ask again. So you get stuck in this kind of grant loop, and it becomes like a crutch, with some companies continuously asking for grant funds. And the sooner that startups can stand on their own 2 feet and commercialize, ironically, they actually attract more grants. They attract more investment funds, because they can prove that they've got customers and they can prove that they've got repeat custom coming in. So Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting kind of catch-22 that those who seek funding sometimes are not the ones that should get the funding because they're stuck in that kind of loop of always asking and not being able to show the commercial side. But those on the commercial side are the ones that blockchains, L1s, that can actually talk about success stories and they can show the TVL. They can, really showcase like these are really successful projects. We can do a whole PR campaign around it. We can attract more investment from even Web2 and partner with Web2 institutions who are already coming into the space. Those are the kind of startups that excite the Web2 institutions. I know from the previous Web2 side, they're very excited about blockchain. And they're also threatened by it, but they want to partner with blockchains projects. So being able to speak to them in a credible manner means you have to show your commercials. They really, really appreciate that. If you're talking in hypotheticals and just talking about the tech, they start to get a little bit phased out really about that. They need to know that this is really a solid project. And talking about the commercials, talking about the legalities as well, all the compliance checks, the KYC, the anti-money laundering checks. If all of those things are done, they've got licensing in the right jurisdictions. They're really happy with those kind of projects, and they want to partner with them. And that's what I find.
The other thing, one thing again, which is always one that always causes me to wake up is kind of the role of influencers and the like. Do you think there's a role for influence in part of this? Because they're kind of very much a Web3 type concept. They exist in a sense as well, but Web3 loves a good influencer campaign given half a chance. Do you think that influencers are a healthy thing, or would you avoid influencers effectively when structuring?
There's a place for influencers, and it's later in the journey. I think getting influencers involved too early means you're amplifying your lack of commercial foundation early. I mean, CryptoKitties, classic example. They used influencer-based campaigns, and they created a lot of hype. And then, like within the first year, that fell like 60, 70% because there was no utility basically, and also high gas fees as well on Ethereum. So every time they wanted to do any kind of activity like breeding more cats, selling, buying, it was like $100, $200 for each activation. It's too high. And there's friction as well for users. Back then, it was like 2017, 2018, where new users didn't know how to set up wallets. So there's too much friction on that side as well. So I think influencers have their place. I mean, influencers are most effective when they come when the project is a little bit more mature, when there's a solid story to tell, and there's some traction with the product, so that the influencer can actually talk about how the product's being used and different kind of use cases.
That's very helpful because I think a lot of people go a wee bit fast into that particular arena. Is there any kind of other advice you would have to people, either things to either do or not do in the early stages, which you kind of think are kind of common mistakes people walk into and should be more wary of, shall we say, particularly kind of for first time founders who haven't necessarily done it before?
Yeah, with first time founders, the path between creating a product that is usable and one that is commercially viable is quite different from really technical products that require quite a lengthy explanation. I think the easiest products to sell are the ones that are easy to understand for customers. So what happens when I speak to founders is they go into I ask them, what does their product do? And they go into a long 20-minute explanation of what their product does. And I have no idea who the customer is. I don't know what problem it's solving. I haven't got the elevator pitch, so I'm not sure I want to, if I was an investor, why would I want to invest in this? It's a bit vague, seems a bit risky. But those founders who can really nail that kind of elevator pitch of, who my typical customers are, this is the problem that I solve, and this is how I solve it for them, and this is the kind of benefits they get. When they hit those kind of 4 points, then it's so much clearer, and they can go anywhere to networking events, or if they're invited to a panel discussion, they can talk about their company and their product easily, and that attracts more awareness.
That makes a lot of sense. And lastly, just in terms of, because there's been a lot of change in the markets all the time at the moment, kind of where do you think things are headed? Do you think AI is going to wipe out Web3? Do you think it's optimism or pessimism do you think is moving forwards in terms of industry as a whole?
I think I'm more an optimist. I think there's a great cross section between AI and Web3, and the kind of companies that come my way tend to be both AI and Web3, which is telling. I think that tends to be an area that seems to be growing at the moment. I think AI is encroaching on certain job functions like marketing agencies. I can see that. But then I also see some professionals pivoting, and those who really utilize AI as part of their day-to-day functions are the ones that are going to do well, rather than those who are fearful about AI. And I think that's tends to be where the industry is going. And in terms of those who are successful, I think that also tends to be where they're going. I think if you're ahead of the curve when it comes to tech, and most Web3 people are, that's why we all got into the space, because we have an inherent interest in technology, and we're early adopters, early innovators, rather than the early majority or laggards. We're just in that stage of the cycle, so we're just going to be ahead of the curve, I think, as a whole. Very few of us, I think, will be kind of left behind by AI. So I'm pretty optimistic about that. As to some of the Web2 folk who are in more traditional jobs, I think they're going to be a lot more affected, especially if they are stuck in like comfort zones in their thinking as well as their operating, and they're not adapting. And it's just like, when the railways came and people are still using horses and carts, for example, and saying, yay, let's just continue using the horse and carts. It's just, you just get left behind, really. And there are some famous quotes from Jamie Dimon, the who was he? The JP Morgan Chase CEO, who was saying, oh, he hates blockchain and crypto is just crap. And, infamously, I guess, he did his U-turn, and now he's like pro crypto, and they've got their ETFs going. So, you can see some industry turnarounds. And it really is about showcasing amazing use cases, because there are many, and we need to showcase them more. And we need to utilize that ability to partner with Web2 firms and really grow the industry into maturity. And I think once it grows into maturity, some of the hype that the industry has been plagued with, you're talking about influencers, some of that will drop away naturally, because those projects are just not going to be taken as seriously as the ones who are like Aave, for example. These are established projects who are respected in the industry. They have clear use cases. They're the ones that institutions want to partner with, for example.
Actually, I just want to just ask you one more question. In terms of your own business, Web3 Growth Engine, what's got, it's been recently founded. What's got you most excited about your business at the moment?
The ability to really educate founders, really, and see their eyes light up when they finally get it. They get it because they've been following, everybody else, and doing their first marketing hires, burning through their runway, and then they come to me and they're like, oh, I should have started here. And then they go and tell their other founders. And that's exactly what Web3 Growth Engine is about. It's to help founders avoid that pitfall, to make them success stories in the long haul. And it helps to mature the industry and increase the credibility of it. So that's what Web3 Growth Engine is really about. And yes, there are two products. One's a diagnostic, one's a commercial education program. But more products will come as time goes on.
Sounds exciting. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Thank you, Tony, for coming on. It's been really insightful and brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Thanks for having me. It's been a great podcast.